Welcome everybody to this Lunch and Learn session as part of the DSA Lunch and Learn seminar series. So we're delighted today to have Cai Gwinnutt who's from Tramshed Tech. So he's Chief Technology Officer in that organisation. So Tramshed Tech is a startup ecosystem for startups and new businesses, and they've got offices in Cardiff. And he's going to tell us a little bit about Tramshed Tech and the whole startup scene in Cardiff today. So without further ado, I'll hand over now.
Cool. Thank you very much, Patrick and Justin. And I'll start with an apology. I've been a bit of a nuisance to pin down and to get to do this. So I'm sorry to you both that I've been a nuisance, but we're here now, so let's get on with it. I've got a presentation, so I'll share my screen just to give you guys a bit of an idea of where we're at. Can we all see that? Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, all good. Yeah.
Fantastic. And as Patrick was saying, my name's Cai and I'm the CTO at Tramshed. I thought what we'd do today is I'd maybe go back to the start of when I was in your position of coming out of university. And I just wanted to pick up on maybe 4 little stories that maybe might be useful for you guys as you start to go into the world of work and to start sort of dealing with people in the real world. And then I'll talk a little bit about Tramshed and what we're doing and why maybe that's exciting and interesting for you. And then we'll do some questions at the end, because ultimately the reason I'm here is to meet you guys, and I'd really love to know what you plan to do next. So when I came out of university, I went to Swansea University and studied computer science. It was a very computer sciencey course. There was not a lot of software engineering in it at that point in time, and we all came out of, we went and we became software developers in industry ultimately. And I didn't know what I was doing. I had a bit of Pascal, a bit of Java, and a little bit of C#. And C# was quite early on in 2006. And so I sort of sat into this team and kind of learnt on the job a little bit, I guess. What happened quite quickly was I was given, there was this piece of software in the Source. So Source is an insurance company, and they had this bit of software that they called the Bordereau, which everybody called Bordeaux, like the wine. And the Bordereau was responsible for working out basically how much revenue the company made every month. And it was a really important tool for the sort of CFO and the finance team. And it processed tens of thousands of transactions, but it took hours and hours to run, and it frequently broke. And everybody was quite scared of it because the CFO was kind of a big, scary man. And it was such a vital sort of tool for the business. And I can remember sitting down with my, sort of 21 years old with all of my naivety, looking at this piece of software and thinking, what it's doing actually isn't that complicated. And the amount of data it's dealing with is actually not that big. It was maybe like a gigabyte or 2 gigabytes at the time. And so I suggested we just scrap it and rewrite it from scratch, to which everybody in the tech team said, no, you can't do that. That's nuts. And so I just quietly sort of sat down and started thinking about it, designing on a piece of paper how I would rebuild this tool, how it would function, how we would be able to run it at night so we could stop all transactions. We could then run through everything in a massive batch, do it all in memory, use, instead it was using old things like ODBC connectors, and we could use newer techniques. And then we could push all of the data back and get it to run down. And eventually, by sheer perseverance and grinding away at my manager, he gave me a little test environment and some time to try and build this. And so I did. I slowly worked away and we built it. And then one of the senior engineers got involved and he was like, okay, let's do a little bit more work on this. And we built it up, and we got it from taking hours and hours to run and falling over to taking literally a couple of minutes to run. And it was quite resilient, it was far more maintainable, and it was really well documented. And by bringing in, making a little test environment, by allowing the CFO to compare our run of it versus the run that they'd used over the last couple of months, we were able to convince him that it all worked. And ultimately, we were able to change it. And as far as I'm aware, that piece of software is still being used today, or some derivative of it. And the story I want you guys to take away from that is, when you go out into the real world, you'll see things and you'll wonder, why is this like this? Don't be afraid to ask the question why, and don't be afraid to make suggestions about change, but also be ready that people that have been ingrained in this and that they're coming from having seen the status quo for a long time might not understand your optimism for change, and you'll need to convince them of your point of view, but also you need to listen to their point of view and get their understanding. And the reason this is important in tech is we move so quickly, and things that were hard 3 years ago can become very easy today. We're seeing that right now with everything in data science, and especially with the rollout of deep learning. Previously, people needed really expensive GPUs to do inference, and today we're starting to see cheaper and cheaper ways of doing inference. And you might be quite early on in thinking about using some of these new techniques. So yeah, that was my story from the source. We'll skip forward a couple of years, and I'd moved to a company called the British Medical Journal. And I guess through your course and through conversations you've been having, you've heard the word, words like agile and terms like Scrum around project management and creating stories and breaking stories down and giving them points. All of that stuff has only really come in over the last 15 years, perhaps. And certainly when I was at that previous job, we weren't doing any of that very well. By 2012, at the BMJ, we were maybe starting to do it and starting to understand a little bit about project management. And so we were acquired ultimately and brought into a much bigger team. And at the time, we thought this team was amazing. We thought they really knew what they were doing, because we'd only seen them from the outside. But in reality, there was quite a lot of inefficiencies in their team, and they looked at us as quite a small team, and they thought, hey, the way these guys work is quite cool. And we didn't appreciate that at the time. So a new CTO came into the business, and that CTO wanted to bring us all together and take some of the best practices from the way they did things and some of the best practices from the way we did things and get them all into one sort of alignment. And we underwent what was a real buzzword around about that time, and still is a little bit, a digital transformation. That was a really difficult time for us because we were this small little nimble team that had very opinionated ways of working, and we thought, we worked quite closely, and then we were being told that we needed to change things and we needed to do things in different ways, and it caused quite a lot of sort of anguish. Anguish is maybe not the right word, but it caused quite a lot of difficulty for us. And one day we sat down as a team, just 4 or 5 of us, and we sort of asked, why is this causing us so much annoyance, and what ultimately is the goal here? And we realized actually our goal was just to work more efficiently with the wider organization, but we could learn an awful lot as individuals from what was going on through this digital transformation, and watching these trainers that were coming in to deliver training, watching these Scrum coaches that were coming in to coach the teams, and watching all of these contractors. And maybe actually there was a bigger picture for us in learning how the wider tech ecosystem worked. And once we kind of made that change, we I guess we learned to sort of let go of the problems we had and just enjoy the experience. As I've worked with now, I don't know, maybe like over 100 software developers in quite, in individual teams. And I find time and time again, we're quite passionate people, and we quite like our sort of order to things. And what's a really useful skill to learn is when to get angry and when to get annoyed about things, and when to get passionate about things, and when to just step back and let it wash over you. That's a skill that you should really try and pick up and that you need to work, well, you might need to work on over the coming years. Certainly in bigger companies, you need to learn to do this, and you can learn an awful lot by just watching what happens and not trying to fight it. In smaller companies, again, sometimes you do just have to let things happen because other people have their agendas, but always just remember to take a step back and consider what you can take away from the experience and what the bigger picture can be for you. After the BMJ, I got to a point where I wanted to try and do something completely different. And I'd kind of had a little bit of enough of working at a desk all day, every day. And so in 2015, I decided to go and do something quite different. And I decided to go and learn properly how to sail and to do a sailing qualification. So, you guys are coming up to this point perhaps in your academic career where you've got your finals at the end of the year, and then you'll go off. And back in 2006, I decided I was never going to do an exam again. In 2015, I signed up for one of the biggest exams I've ever taken. And what we did, there's three of us, there's Roy, Charles and myself. We spent 16 weeks in the Solent learning to sail, and we took the Yacht Master exam at the end, which is a 48-hour exam. It's quite a beast of a thing. Well, I did this primarily because I just wanted to get outdoors and I wanted a bit of a break from software development. But very quickly, I learned how to manage people in a very different environment to a software team. In sailing, it's not collaborative as much as there's one skipper on a boat and the skipper is in charge of the boat. And we do that because it's a very safety conscious environment. You can't have people going off and doing their own things. And also, it's not a very creative environment. Once you make the plan, you just have to execute that plan, because otherwise you might miss the tide, you might miss the wind might change and nobody knows what they're doing, and you can end up breaking things, you can end up running aground, you can end up breaking the boat and putting people's lives at risk. And so this is a great kind of learning experience. And I realized that when I'm interviewing software developers and when I'm building software teams, it is important to ask people what their hobbies, what their interests outside of software are, because that can bring a whole other wealth of experience to the table that you don't necessarily learn through the junior software developer, project manager, scrum master, product owner pathway of building software. As part of this, we sailed, so we did a lot of sailing down in Southampton, the English Channel, and then I was lucky enough to sail across the Mediterranean, eventually across the Atlantic, some sailing in the Caribbean, and yeah, it's great. What my takeaway for you there is you've got about roughly 100 years maybe ahead of you, depending on how long you live, and don't leave it right to the end of your lives in order to do something different and to enjoy the best parts of it. So when I went to go sailing, some people said to me, Cai, you can't do that. You've got a career and you need to focus on your career. The reality is we're very, very fortunate in the software industry that there's a lot of vacancies And people increasingly are okay with you having gaps, so long as you've done something really interesting in those gaps. So if a couple of years down the road, or if maybe next year you're thinking about taking a gap year, fill it with something interesting, fill it with some sort of learning, but it doesn't have to be textbook learning. And ultimately that just makes you a much more compelling kind of candidate. How are we doing for time? Okay, cool. So most recently, as Justin mentioned, after I came back from sailing, I joined Amplify, and then after Amplify, I joined Tramshed. I joined Tramshed in 2019. I'd been working at Amplify for a couple of years at that point, and we'd been building the tech team, the early tech team. I think there was about 6 of us when I joined, and something like 35, 40 when I left. So we built that early tech team, we put all of the processes in place, we built the product, and we defined what the product was going to be, from pretty much a research product through to a production product. And I really enjoyed that, I really loved it. And the reason I left was because I could just see that it was now becoming a business, and there was more of the business kind of day-to-day running of it. And the passionate part for me was building that early team and building that early product and getting things off the ground. I could see that happening around me at Tramshed with other companies. And when I spoke to Mark and Louise, I could see that was ultimately what they were passionate about. So I joined Tramshed in order basically to grow that incubator and that early stage part of our business. And it's been fantastic. The last year has obviously been a little bit difficult for a physical space with COVID, but it's given me an opportunity to work with dozens and dozens of really great entrepreneurs and early stage teams to get involved in their product process and to help people who maybe have side projects and ideas that they want to grow into companies, to define, to nail down what exactly that product is. And how they're going to build it, to work with financing and funding, to work with recruiters to find great people, to work with universities to do collaborations, to work with government to try and find foreign customers and buyers for their products. And that's ultimately what we're going to be doing over the next 10, 30, 40 years. We're currently expanding. We have this site in Cardiff, which I hope some of you have been to or will get to come to. We are also moving into the National Software Academy in Newport, and we're opening a venue in Swansea around about this time next year. So, I mean, my big hope is that when you guys in the future are maybe working in a startup or doing your own startups, you'll think about giving us a call. And maybe we can do something together. So that's kind of my whistle-stop tour through my 4 points. And I'd love to sort of hear any questions you guys have, and maybe let's try and start a discussion.
Thanks, Cai. That's great. So I was just going to ask, how do you sort of see Tramshed Tech benefiting from the whole COVID situation? I mean, there's a lot of focus now on people working from home, home offices. Companies are sort of feeling that, maybe we don't need to spend all this rent out on places. And I mean, obviously, Tramshed Tech has got a big business model about co-working space and people working in offices together.
Yeah.
How do you see sort of Tramshed coming out of COVID and benefiting from anything that you've been able to branch out into?
Absolutely, no, that's a great question. Thank you. I think it's a really exciting time for us. So, round about when we went into the first lockdown, we sat down as a senior management team and we thought, hey, this is worrying. This is really worrying. If people are not coming here, then we don't just lose the footfall, but we potentially lose the network and obviously all of the revenue from leasing offices. In reality, what's happened over the last year is we've moved a lot of companies in who needed a physical space. So we've moved in cybersecurity companies, we've moved in some media businesses, and we've moved in some smaller teams that just needed to be together. coming out of COVID, I think it's been amazing really how easily companies have transitioned to working from home. It was always that, oh, we can never do that. And then when we were forced to do it, actually it wasn't that difficult. And even banks and insurance companies and companies who have quite difficult regulatory requirements have managed to do it. So we've seen a huge uptake in business and a case of people using Tramshed for the collaboration elements, so to bring the team together, to do the whiteboarding sessions, to do the sprint planning, to do their retrospectives, but then maybe they'll disperse in order to actually get on with doing the work. The biggest problem for us is if everybody wants to do their sprint planning on a Monday, we only have so much space every day of the week. So we need to kind of convince companies to maybe just stagger their sprint planning through the week to fit everybody in. But yeah, hopefully this becomes the way of working in the future.
Great, thanks.
So I have a question. Can you give some examples of maybe some companies which came out of former students at Cardiff University that maybe you're now working with or have worked with?
Yeah, so Robin, which is Virtuous Tech, Robin Davis, I think graduated from Cardiff in 2019.
He was one of their first applied software engineering students to graduate.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Hired Robin at Amplify. He has he looks like a little cherub. He's got such a young face, but he's absolutely brilliant and just kind of great mentality about just getting on with things. Robin left Amplify last summer, I believe it was, to start Virtuous, and they now have a contract with the Cardiff University Hospital to do virtual tours to help patients who are coming to the hospital with orientation prior to arriving, which is quite exciting. They've also done an awful lot over the last couple of months with estate agents, because obviously we can't go and see houses in order to do viewings, and so they've been going in with their drones and their little robots and stuff to do virtual tours. So I think that's probably the one I'm most excited about. We've also had a couple of there's the Bitcoin meetup, which was rolled out to some of the guys at Cardiff University who were at Cardiff University, and so that's quite good to see, not just companies but also kind of networking events and networking programs coming out as well, and that we're able, at least when we're open and able to get people in here for meetups, able to help support that.
I'm working with Robin.
Oh, fantastic! Who's this?
Justin knows me, I think. Well, he does know me. I went to the NSA as well with Robin, and then he contacted me recently and said he was doing a startup, and we started working together.
Brilliant.
I went to the Tramshed with him the other day. Well, I don't know how long ago it was, but we booked out.
Oh, I remember.
We did whiteboarding session and stuff, and like you said, we just went to use the whiteboard, like you said, to have a meeting, and then we went and did the work remotely. Then
you were in the Holt, right? The room with the settees and the whiteboard. Yes.
Did you see us?
I wasn't in that day, but I think Louise was around. Yeah. Yeah, and that's like an example of, previously in an office, it's quite difficult to cut out that much space to create a nice environment. But obviously for us, if we can rent that room out every day, then it works for us. And I think it's quite a nice room to have, right?
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, it's like one of my first experiences in Tramshed. It's nice. Yeah.
Fantastic. I need to. Yeah, we'll get you guys back. I need to go and book some more dates in with Robin.
Yeah.
Okay, so Robert Green is asking, why would someone rent a space from you over perhaps renting from a hotel or a restaurant or something like that? So
that's a really good question. So let me stop this presentation and then maybe I can see some stuff. Yeah, probably our biggest competitors are hotels. A couple of reasons. If you've ever been to a meeting in a hotel, usually you're stuck in a kind of drab room with some really terrible sandwiches and some pretty awful coffee. And surprisingly, I say this genuinely I don't understand it. Even some really good hotels that have lovely suites have quite bad meeting rooms. Whereas Tramshed is, so I'm in a room here which has screens set up. Outside is our main co-working space, which is a bit more fun. And then, as we were just talking about, we've got rooms like the Halt with settees, that are laid out a bit better. Pricing-wise, we're competitive, but predominantly everybody in here is building software or is building tech products. Whereas if you go to a hotel or maybe a Regis or somewhere, you'll find salespeople selling windows or selling trucks or selling something. You'll find, I don't know, regional management seminars on sales of something else. So the reason to come to us is because we're a tech space, and you'll find, like-minded people, and hopefully people that you can collaborate with. I think that's the best sales pitch for us.
So in terms of your space in Newport and Swansea, then how will they be similar to where you are in Cardiff? Will they have similar, or are you looking at sort of tailoring those to the respective locations and putting different things in, or same?
No, so Newport looks very similar to this. Again, I'm sure you're all familiar with the building, beautiful red brick building on the station. We'll have a coffee shop, which we don't have here, which would be good, serving food and coffee. We'll have, which would also be great for the NSA guys as well. We'll do you guys a discount. We'll have space. We'll have some offices, sort of between 4 people and 8 people offices for small companies and growing companies. It's all done on a daily, weekly, monthly sort of allowance, depending on how frequently you want to use the space. Or similarly, if companies want to use it just to do their, every other week, their Scrum planning meetings or something, then we can book those in advance. Swansea is going into an absolutely stunning building called the Palace Theatre, which has been vacant since about the 70s. There's a huge regeneration project going in as part of the council there, and it's a slightly different configuration of space just because it is a theatre, and there's some sort of preservation orders on it, but it'll be the same offering more or less, again with great food and coffee and tea on the ground floor.
Do you offer any services to companies to help them raise finance to start new companies? Yeah,
good point. So we've been running the Tramshed Academy for about 2 years now, and we're sort of doubling down and growing the scope of that, and it'll become a little bit more formalized. So the next cohort is in the summer, and there's information about that on our website. Any size company can join, so even if you've just got an idea and you're looking to grow a company, or you're maybe post-revenue, there's something to be found. That's a free service. And then as part of that, we're putting together, we already have great relationships into Development Bank of Wales, into Angels Invest Wales, and also then into some of the VCs around the UK and up into Scotland, and even some over in France. We're constantly building that network and those relationships. And so, as companies looking for funding, not only can we make introductions, but we can make warm introductions in terms of saying, we know these people a little bit, you should take their call.
So how do you fund the Academy is the next question Robert has.
Wow, these are good questions. So Welsh Government is very keen to grow the tech sector in Wales. And we've worked with them to start the academy and to grow it, and we were initially delivering it up into Newtown and Carmarthen in order to try and help companies in those areas which were considered to be underserved growing. More recently, yeah, we grow it as part of, so, you know, you might go out and do marketing, and that marketing can look like sort of doing sales and buying Facebook ads and all of that. For us, running the academy is part of our kind of marketing strategy, in terms of we want to make those relationships, deliver something to companies early on, and then hopefully when you guys grow, you take some space with us, and we find other ways to collaborate. So yeah, it works like that.
Are you familiar with Shipshape, which is an organisation based in Cardiff for linking companies to investors? I mentioned Shipshape because they spoke at our lunch and learn a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I know the name. I don't know that I know any of them, but yeah.
I think they're quite new to Cardiff. They're setting up an office which is on the same street as the new Maths ComSci building. Right. So you probably will get to know them in the future. So they'll be in this. They're just setting up a presence in the moment in Cardiff.
Yeah, we'll have to. Yeah, we'll have to reach out to them.
Yeah, they're very friendly and very approachable. Like, so yeah, you should.
I feel that's been like the big change as well, is that everybody involved in the startup ecosystem, from the incubators and the accelerators through to, you know, investors and the money people, are much nicer to deal with in 2021 than they were maybe 10 years ago. Everyone seems to be having a bit more fun now, so that's good. I don't know. Yeah, it would be great if the market can come in and, you know, fully support that in Wales, and that's part of what we're doing, is we're trying to grow that so that there's enough interest for commercial entities to come in, and, you know, maybe even like one day the Sequoias and the, you know, Union Squares of this world to come and make investments in Wales. It's all very much about getting it started now and growing it.
Yeah, I think it's for economic reasons that the government are interested in investing this in this Tramshed, not for political reasons or political gain.
Yeah, and I should say that they're not an investor in us. You know, we are entirely independently owned, and we are a commercial entity. But it's just good to have those relationships.
Is there any? Have you got any video game companies within Tramshed? Because I feel like there's a lot of, you know, businessy, finance, whatever companies. I feel like there's a lack of video game or entertainment companies in Wales. You guys got any in the Tramshed?
Yeah, so in Tramshed, on the entertainment side, we have a production suite for Whisper, who are ultimately owned by Sony, and the Welsh entity there that they've recently acquired was Lens 360. We also have Red and Black Films, who are an independent filmmaker, and also Film Cymru, who, as far as I understand, if you make a film in Wales, Film Cymru are nearly always involved in some capacity. They have an office here. So that sort of entertainment side of it. Video games, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see some move in. We had back in 2019, I think it was, like a mini conference, which brought a load of games companies in. And I was trying to work with the guys over in like Arcade Vaults in Cardiff. And some of the other, just to try and do a bit of mapping about who's around, and B, just trying to find out what services we could offer into that space.
They did. I went to one of their jams, gaming code jams, which is really good, and Tramshed would be amazing space for someone like that for a code jam.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of it. And Gino, who's from Tech Nation, so Tech Nation is like a UK-wide tech body, but Gino, who's the Welsh representative, in his spare time makes board games, so not video games, but and absolutely love learning about that, because that's kind of designing board games was just something that didn't even occur to me as being a thing. It's quite interesting, and I think fits relatively well with the sort of all of us geeks.
And what would you said you're looking into getting into investing with Tramshed, into potentially, you know, someone present an idea and then you funding that idea, or what kind of pitch? What would it take? You know, would someone present an MVP to you? Would it just be a presentation? Do you want to see some code running?
No, yeah, absolutely. So as far as investments, what we can do is we can pull together investors for young companies to pitch towards. The old deal used to be, you need to have an MVP and maybe 6 slides, and you can talk through that as like a way to get them interested. Increasingly, to be honest, as long as you can show some form of traction, people are open to getting presented to in different ways. So I wouldn't say there's one sort of one model fits all anymore. But yeah, if you've got some code and if you've got a customer, or you can prove that you can get some customers interested in this product, then that's the best way to invest. Ultimately, what an investor wants to invest in is a company that has a huge opportunity but really needs some money right now in order to scale, because then they know that their money is going to be put to good use.
Yeah.
Are there any further questions?
Cool. So can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So for those of you who, I guess, are either at the point of graduating or sort of just graduated or wherever, what do you want to do next? What is your ambitions? What kind of companies are you hoping to work for?
You can put it in the chat if you don't want to on mute.
So obviously for Robin, so like I'm finishing my dissertation and master's at the moment, but I enjoy working with Robin because he's like, obviously we met each other in the NSA. He's quite creative and there's flexibility and he understands that. So there's some flexibility in the way we work together and stuff, which also allows me to pursue my own things while doing Virtus, which I think, like you said, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool thing itself.
Have you ever asked Robin, or has he ever told you the story about the bow and arrow?
I'm
dropping him in this. Ask Robin about, say Cai said to ask you about the bow and arrow.
Yeah, I'll send him a message. Yeah.
How about, anybody else? You're all very quiet.
Robert's got another question in the chat. So are you dependent on the government bonds for financial solvency? And what is your plan to get to a state where you would be solvent without them?
No, we are. We're absolutely, we're fine without them. There's no government bonds or anything like that. We are a commercial entity and profit generating.
I suppose the big question is are you still sailing?
It's been the worst part of the last 12 months because sailing boats are, if there's an ill person on a sailing boat, then everybody gets ill very quickly because everybody's touching the same thing. So no, the last 12 months, but I'm really looking forward to getting back to it. And there's a fantastic charity in Cardiff called Challenge Wales. If you go down to Penarth Marina, you'll see the 2 boats they have down there. 2 old whitbread around the world racing boats. They take people who don't come from a sailing background and who may not ordinarily get to go sailing out, and they do some big boat racing with them. And so I've been involved in that, and it's really good fun.
Have you done any big sailing trips then, or have you more sort of local stuff?
So did a transatlantic. It's probably the longest. That was the furthest offshore I've ever sailed. That was fantastic. That was a 17-day, including a bit of swimming right in the middle of the Atlantic with 5 kilometers of water below you. Transited the Panama Canal, which was pretty good fun. Sailing across the Med, stopping in all the pretty little ports and drinking coffee and eating gelato, and so good.
So Thomas has got a question. What AI or big data companies do you have working at Tramshed?
Cool. Amplify is the one that everybody knows and the most notable. And obviously I have a bit of a personal background and interest in Amplify. We build bots who cater to They work a lot with local authorities to help them automate people calling in and requiring regular services. So a lot of council time is spent dealing with the same thing from like 1,000 different people. And so a lot of the times that can just be automated. So there's a bit of robotic process automation / AI involved in that. We've had companies like EchoSec just down the corridor. So they harvest the dark web and help companies look out for threats in that space. So, you know, you might be a bank or something, and you need to know if there's been a data breach. They will trawl the dark web and look for any data breaches that might be coming from, might be your data sets, and give you some early announcements or early warning on that. There was a geospatial company who were working with Transport for Wales, with transport companies to help them understand what property they had and what development opportunities there were around that property, which seemed very niche but quite interesting. Who else is in the data space? What I need is a big list of all the companies, and then I can kind of go through them. But yeah, I think big data is kind of a strange word, because as I was saying at the start, the source 2 gigabytes, in 2006 felt like quite a big amount of data, whereas when Justin and Patrick and I were speaking the other day about a potential project, I was like, oh yeah, I'll just give them like a couple of terabytes of data, and they were like, no, maybe not that much. But what is big data today? Are we into? Does it mean we have to be dealing with petabytes or potentially more? Yeah.
Fair enough. So Daniel has a question. Are there different arrangements for international non-EU students in terms of access?
No, I don't care where you come from, as long as you bring a smile and a great attitude, you're more than welcome.
Ryan's asking if students are able to email you with some questions directly. Is that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I
You can pop your email in. Chris is asking, do you see yourself as a future competitor to the Alacrity Foundation and the way that they a sort of incubator for startups?
I read that question then, Christopher, as do you see yourself as a failure? And I thought that's a bit hard. No, I see us working very closely. So the Alacrity Foundation is Terry Matthews and Will Williams. It's a brilliant organisation, great startup in Newport. We have a good relationship with Will, and if I've got a design on this, what I would like to see happen is, if you've got an idea, I'd love for you to come to us and talk to us about your idea, and we can try and help you get that off the ground. Once we've provided as much help as we can help, we can do as a sort of incubator. Sorry, my hands are down there. As an incubator, what you probably need next is an accelerator to really help you take off and grow. So if you were in the sort of Alacrity space around cyber and around those sort of things, then I think you should come from us, and we can sort of introduce you to those guys. If you don't know them, you can go into Alacrity and you can take off. If you want to go into fintech, Johnny from FinTech Wales, they just announced their accelerator. Johnny was here last week. And yeah, I think, then you go into those guys and you take off. And it's a similar relationship that I'm hoping that we can have with Cardiff Uni and the projects that we do there, in terms of saying, oh, hey, look, here's a company that's got some great ideas, but they could do with maybe some student projects or some research projects, and then we can help to build that. And ultimately, it's about creating an ecosystem in South Wales or in Wales and the West that really kindles those young companies, those startup ideas, and helps them to grow as sort of efficiently and as quickly as possible. So no, I think we need to get rid of this idea of people being competitors, and actually we're all here to enable the ecosystem. And I think they would say exactly the same thing.
So if anything, then there's more of a partnership. It's maybe unofficial, but you'll take people in with an idea, and you might incubate, and then you'll send them off to maybe Alacrity, and so you're trying to work together really.
Precisely that.
But what would you want out of it though, if you gave a startup the space to make something an MVP for 2-3 months? Would you want something out of the final product if it grew after a few years, or?
So there are companies we've worked with who we have taken equity positions in, but we've only done that where we've delivered a sort of cash equivalent into the company. So it's not a case of if you come through the door, we're expecting to take some sort of ownership stake in the company. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
But if we can work mutually and there's economic benefit to everybody, then yeah, of course that's something we can think about.
Okay.
Cool,
I suppose as you mentioned, so Cai is going to be providing a project for the master's students on Data Science Academy programs. So that's based around looking at funding for companies and which companies have been funded by whom, and
Exactly.
looking at company house data. So exciting project for perhaps a artificial intelligence master's student or data science and analytics student. So those projects for the computer science school based students will be going out next week. So have a look out for those, and yeah, great opportunity there to work on an industry project.
Awesome.
Cool. Okay. Are there any final questions? Otherwise, I think perhaps we'll wrap up. Park, I'll let you finish.
Yeah. Okay. So just end by thanking everybody for attending, and especially thanks to Cai for presenting and leading a very interesting discussion.
Cool. Yeah, from my point of view, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for all the questions.
Yeah, we'd definitely like to have you back to talk about either something similar or how things are going. So welcome you back next year.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Take care,
Okay.
everybody.
All right. Thank you.